Okay, so we talk about freedom a lot, right?
Hmm.
Freedom of speech, freedom to travel. But
Uh,
today we're going deeper.
yeah.
We're getting into like the core freedom to just be ourselves.
Right.
Like the real you under all the stuff that we put on, and we're doing this based on some really cool material you shared,
Mm-hmm.
and we're asking some pretty big questions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is it that actually stops us from living in that authentic freedom? Is it really the outside world? Is it societal pressures? Or is it something within us,
Yeah, right.
that holds us back?
And the perspective here is that it's really easy to blame outside forces,
Right.
right? Like, oh, it's the government or it's this or it's my job or whatever. But
Right.
the material is really suggesting that often we are getting in our own way.
Yeah.
And it talks about these internal figures like the judge, the victim, and this whole like belief system that we kind of carry around,
Mhm.
like a script we didn't even write.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is to contrast that with like young children.
It's like
Right.
2 to 4 years old, they just do what they want.
Right.
They're exploring. They're totally absorbed in play. They don't worry about mistakes or what might happen next.
Right.
They express their feelings. They don't hold back,
Hmm.
and they just seem to like radiate love.
Yeah, that like pure uninhibited kind of being.
Yeah.
And the material suggests that that's actually like our natural state. So
Uh-huh.
the question then becomes like, how do we lose that?
Right.
And more importantly, can we get it back?
Yeah.
So we're going to take a deep dive into this Toltec path to freedom to find out.
Yeah, let's unpack how we lose that childhood freedom.
Okay.
The source talks about, this internal book of law,
Yeah.
a big judge and the victim.
Right.
So how do these kind of take shape and start running our lives?
Yeah, so I think a good way to think about it is like the book of law is
Okay.
is like all the shoulds and shouldn'ts, that we've picked up along the way from our family, our friends, society, like all the rules that we've been taught.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like this unconscious guide, and then from that comes the judge, which is like that inner critic that's constantly
Yeah.
like measuring us and everyone else
Hmm.
against this book, like, am I
Right.
good enough? Are they doing it right?
Right.
And of course, like, we inevitably don't measure up
Yeah.
to these often like impossible standards, right?
Of course.
And then the victim shows up feeling blamed, inadequate, powerless. And so it's like we've got this critic constantly comparing us to this impossible rule book,
Yeah.
and we always feel like we fall short.
Right, and that feeling of inadequacy, that's the cage
Yeah.
that keeps us from being truly free.
It's like we're trapped in our own heads.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is that the material really emphasizes that like this whole programming
Right.
isn't anyone's fault.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, you can blame your parents or
Uh-huh.
or society. Really, it's like it's a chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's passed down generation to generation.
Yeah, it's just how we've been trained.
Yeah, it's like we're all running on the same like outdated software.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is interesting how this whole idea of responsibilities
Right.
really kicks in, I think, as we get older and kind of
Yeah.
accelerates this whole process of losing our freedom.
Absolutely. Like think about the shift that happens as we, take on more responsibilities,
Yeah.
work bills, maybe looking after families. Like
Right.
we put on this serious adult face
Right.
and that playful, spontaneous child within
Yeah.
seems to get locked away.
Yeah, like they can't coexist.
Yeah, it's like we believe that
Yeah.
being free and being responsible are somehow mutually exclusive.
And then you've got this huge societal pressure to,
Yeah.
live up to all these external expectations to please everyone else. And
Right.
the source even goes so far as to say that like 999 out of 1,000 people are
Wow.
living this like domesticated life,
Mm.
just trying to fit into someone else's mold.
Which leads to, I think, a really crucial point here.
Okay.
Most people aren't even aware
Yeah.
that they're not truly free.
Right.
They might have this underlying feeling
Yeah.
that something's not quite right,
Uh-huh.
but they don't recognize that there's this internal judge and victim
Right.
that are pulling the strings.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't realize you're in a cage, you won't look for the key.
Exactly. And so becoming aware of that,
Right?
this internal setup, these wounds and emotional poison, that might be clouding our judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That's the vital first step.
That's it. Because if you don't know there's a problem,
Yeah.
you can't start to fix it.
Exactly.
And this leads us to I think, a really powerful idea
Okay.
in the source material, this concept of a parasite in the mind.
Okay.
Now, this isn't a literal creature, of course,
Right?
but it's a potent metaphor.
Okay.
So what does this Toltec idea represent?
So they saw this judge, this victim, and like our whole belief system
Mm-hmm.
as this kind of internal parasite that hijacks our thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
And what keeps this parasite alive? Negative emotions,
Right.
especially fear.
Yeah.
It's like fear is its food source.
It's fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how the source describes this parasite almost as having its own life force,
Oh, wow.
made up of psychic or emotional energy. So it's not
Okay.
physical,
Right.
but its influence is very real.
Yeah.
It thrives on drama and suffering. It's constantly pushing us towards
Right.
situations that generate those negative feelings.
So it's like this puppet master
Yeah,
living vicariously through us, always seeking out the next emotional hit.
exactly.
And the freedom that we're after, according to this view, is about taking back control
Uh-huh.
of our own minds and bodies, operating independently of this belief system.
That's right.
So this parasite, it's not like a literal creature.
No.
It's more like this collection of these negative thoughts and beliefs
Right.
that have kind of taken root. It's like that nagging inner voice.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
That's always putting us down.
Yeah, yeah.
And once we recognize this, right,
Uh-huh.
this idea that our minds might be under the sway of this parasite,
Right.
the source presents us with this clear fork in the road.
Okay.
So what are those two paths?
Well, the first one, unfortunately, is to just carry on as we are,
Yeah, right.
right? Unaware or maybe just resigned to this state of unfreedom.
Right.
But the second path is where things get interesting.
Yeah.
It's about channeling that rebellious spirit we had as kids, when we were being told what to do all the time.
Yeah.
It's about saying no more
Yeah.
to this internal control declaring war
Yes.
on the judge and the victim.
An inner revolution.
Yeah, an inner war for our independence and the right to our own thoughts and feelings.
And this is where the concept of the warrior comes in. And it's not about external conflicts, but this internal rebellion
Right.
against the parasite in the mind. And the source emphasizes,
Yeah.
being a warrior doesn't guarantee victory,
Right.
but the very act of fighting for our freedom
Uh-huh.
gives us dignity.
Right. It's about refusing to be a helpless pawn
Exactly.
of our own emotions or the
Mhm.
negativity of others.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this warrior's path opens the possibility
Right.
of moving beyond what's called the dream of the planet,
Yeah.
which is kind of this shared, often fear-driven reality we've all bought into,
Uh-huh.
and reaching our own inner heaven.
And this heaven, it's important to understand,
Yeah.
it isn't some distant afterlife,
Right.
but a state of mind, a place of joy, where
yeah.
we are free to love and be our true selves right here, right now.
Here and now.
The source then outlines three
Yeah.
key masteries on this Toltec path.
Okay.
So can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. So first, there's the mastery of awareness, which we've already talked about a bit.
Uh-huh.
Recognizing who we truly are with all our potential.
Right.
Second is the mastery of transformation. It's
Agreed.
about learning how to break free from this domestication
Mm-hmm.
and change our limiting beliefs. And then third is the mastery of intent.
Now, intent here has a very specific meaning.
Okay.
The source describes it as the force that makes energy transformation possible,
Wow.
a universal unifying power. Essentially unconditional love, or what some might call God. So the mastery of intent is also the mastery of love. Think of it as that focused energy and genuine desire that drives real change within us.
And when it comes to actually destroying the parasite, or rather the fears that fuel it,
Right.
the source offers 3 different strategies.
Let's go through them.
All right.
The first one is the most straightforward, although perhaps the most challenging.
Okay, so what's that?
It's confronting each fear individually, head on, one at a time.
Okay.
The material says it's a slow process, but it's a reliable one. Every time we face a fear and don't let it control us, we reclaim a bit more of our freedom.
Okay.
The second approach focuses on cutting off the parasite's food supply.
So it's like starving it out.
Exactly.
Ugh.
It's about learning to control our emotions
Uh-huh.
and refusing to indulge in those fear-based feelings.
Yeah.
The catch, as the source points out,
Yeah.
is that the judge and victim are often the ones stirring up those emotions in the first place.
Oh, right. So it's like this
Yeah.
balancing act.
It is a tricky one.
Yeah.
And the third solution is quite profound.
Okay.
It's the initiation of the dead.
Wow. Okay, can you explain that?
Yeah, this is presented as a faster,
Okay.
though more intense path.
Uh-huh.
It's a symbolic death,
Okay.
letting go of the old self, the old beliefs that no longer serve us.
Yeah.
And this effectively weakens the parasite without any physical harm.
Hmm.
It takes real courage and inner strength to face this metaphorical angel of death.
Right. And this idea of symbolic death and rebirth kind of connects to the concept of the dream of the second attention.
Yeah, how does this differ from the dream of the first attention?
So the dream of the first attention is essentially the domestication process itself,
Okay.
where we passively absorb external beliefs and agreements.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of shapes our initial view of reality.
Our first dream of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the dream of the second attention is about consciously choosing where we focus our energy.
Right.
And actively rewriting those old beliefs and agreements that we've made with ourselves.
That's a key distinction.
Yeah.
The crucial difference is that as children,
Yeah.
we didn't get to pick what we believed.
Right.
But as adults,
Huh?
the source emphasizes that we do have that power.
Yeah.
We can choose what to accept and what to reject.
Right.
Especially those negative beliefs about ourselves.
And the first step here is becoming aware of what the source calls the fog in our minds. Realizing that we're constantly interpreting reality through this filter
Right.
of our beliefs and the drama in our lives often comes from these unreal limiting beliefs
Yes.
that we've just accepted as truth.
So the art of transformation
Yeah.
is about taking a hard look at these self-limiting, fear-based beliefs,
Yeah.
these old agreements we've made, and then consciously reprogramming our minds.
And rewiring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source even mentions the four agreements
Right.
as an example of alternative beliefs that can help us break free
Yeah.
and reclaim our personal power.
And this process of confronting our deepest limiting beliefs.
Right.
It's described as going into the desert,
Yes.
facing our demons.
Facing those core agreements.
Yeah.
And this takes increasing our personal power,
Right.
which we build by first breaking smaller,
Okay.
less ingrained agreements. Think of it like exercising a muscle.
Yeah.
You start with lighter weights.
You got to work up to it.
Yeah, and the example of the little girl told not to sing beautifully
Right.
illustrates this overcoming that seemingly small belief
Yeah.
that her voice wasn't good enough can be a starting point for building the confidence
Okay.
to tackle bigger, more deeply rooted beliefs.
And it's so important to remember that for every old negative agreement
Yeah,
that we let go of, we need to replace it with a new positive one.
right.
Otherwise, that old belief might just sneak back in.
It'll find its way back.
Yeah, to fill the void. It's like decluttering your house.
Yeah.
You don't just throw things out.
Uh-huh.
You organize what you want to keep.
You create space for something better.
Yeah.
And the challenge, of course, is that these old agreements often have a powerful grip on us.
Yeah.
We've invested so much emotional energy in them. And we can even become attached to the familiar negative emotions that they create.
It's like we're addicted to our own suffering.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where the importance of repetition comes in. Just like those old beliefs were formed through repeated exposure and reinforcement,
Right.
adopting new agreements requires consistent practice.
So what about like consciously choosing
It is.
and reinforcing
Yes.
the beliefs that support our freedom and well-being?
That's it, like repeating a positive affirmation
Yeah.
until it becomes your new internal dialogue.
Yeah, and this brings us to this essential idea of a warrior's discipline, which isn't about controlling others,
Right.
but about mastering ourselves.
Yeah, it's self-mastery.
Yeah, and the source gives a great example of how like a bad argument in the morning can just like completely drain our energy and enthusiasm
For the whole day.
for the rest of the day.
It can color everything.
Yeah, it's amazing how much our emotions color our entire experience.
Isn't it like when we're angry, everything seems unfair?
Yeah.
When we're sad, the world looks bleak.
Uh-huh.
And when we're afraid, we become suspicious of everything.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing the world through these colored lenses.
Exactly. And the source uses this vivid image of infected skin
Okay.
to describe our wounded emotional body covered in all this emotional poison of past hurts, resentment, anger, sadness.
Yeah.
And it points out that this wounded state is often mistaken as just normal.
But it's not normal.
It's not. It's a dysfunctional dream of the planet,
Right.
a kind of mental sickness rooted in fear.
Yeah.
And the source even suggests that extreme fear can overwhelm our rational mind
Right.
and contribute to what we call mental illness.
And what does the Source offer as the cure for these emotional wounds?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
But not for the benefit of the person who hurt us,
Right.
but for our own healing out
Uh-huh.
of self-love.
Yeah.
It's about breaking free from those roles of judge and victim
Right.
that we play with ourselves.
And the Source really stresses the importance of forgiving everyone, parents, siblings, friends,
Yeah.
even a concept of a higher power,
Right.
and ultimately forgiving ourselves.
That's the key.
This is the path to ending self-rejection and cultivating self-acceptance and love.
And how do we know
Yeah.
when we've truly forgiven someone?
Yeah, how do we know?
The sign, according to the Source, is the absence of any emotional reaction.
Oh.
When we see that person or even hear their name,
Mm.
the old wound no longer triggers pain.
Yeah.
The Source describes truth as a necessary scalpel to open those wounds that are often hidden
Right.
by our denial system, allowing them to heal.
Right.
But the real power to heal,
Okay.
to change those fear-based agreements and
Right.
create our own inner heaven,
Yeah.
comes from controlling our emotion.
And this is the core of the warrior's discipline, right?
This is it.
Self-control over our emotions and
Mhm.
our actions. It's not about suppressing feelings out of fear,
No.
like a victim, but consciously choosing how we respond.
Right, having that control beforehand.
Yeah.
Finally, the Source explores what it calls the initiation of the dead, presenting the acceptance of death as a powerful teacher
Wow.
that helps us truly live in the present.
Okay.
The awareness of our own mortality,
Uh-huh.
the understanding that our time is limited,
Right.
really focuses our attention on what truly matters
Yeah.
in the present moment.
In the here and now.
Exactly. And the thought experiment of having only a week to live
Right.
really brings this into sharp focus.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
suddenly worrying about what others think or holding on to grudges
Right.
seems incredibly unimportant compared to just being ourselves and
Yeah.
experiencing joy.
Yeah.
The angel of death in this context teaches us to live each day fully with an open heart
Hmm.
and without holding on to resentments.
So the initiation of death itself
Yes.
is this symbolic letting go of that old dream.
It is the weakening of the internal parasite.
Right.
And its limiting beliefs. The memories remain, but their power over us fades.
Okay.
And from this symbolic death comes resurrection,
Wow.
rising from the dead of living in that limited dream.
To a state of being like a child again.
Right.
Wild and free.
Yeah.
But now with wisdom instead of just
Yeah.
innocence.
Right.
And this allows us to break free from domestication and heal our minds.
And the angel of death's perspective, as presented here,
Yeah.
is that everything is ultimately temporary, just on loan to us.
Hmm.
And embracing this impermanence brings lasting happiness
Yeah,
by releasing our grip on the past
it does.
and fully living in the present. The parasite, the Source reminds us, wants us to carry the heavy baggage of the past.
It does. It wants us to stay stuck.
Yeah.
The angel of death helps us drop that dead weight, freeing us to truly live now.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
the central message, I think, is pretty clear.
Uh-huh.
True freedom isn't about changing the external world,
Right.
but about an internal transformation.
It's an inside job.
Yeah, it's about waking up to our own domestication,
Hmm.
understanding this parasite of our limiting beliefs and negative emotions,
Right.
and actively choosing to
Yeah.
reclaim.
That wild, childlike spirit
Mm.
through self-awareness transformation and a deep appreciation for the present moment.
Ultimately, the freedom to be who we truly are is attainable,
Yeah.
but it calls for us to bravely challenge our internal judge
Right.
and quiet the voice of the victim.
And with that in mind, here's something to ponder.
Okay.
If the way we've been living is based on a dream,
Mm-hmm.
built on beliefs that we might not have even consciously chosen,
Right.
what small agreement might you start to question today?
Hmm.
What's one tiny step you could take on your own Toltec path to freedom?
That's a great question for all of us to consider.